Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Solstice, whatever it is you celebrate. Welcome to bonus episode 38 of season 2 of Dr. G at the Heart of Healthcare. We are talking about deathversaries during the holidays. Hello, you two.
Hi, thanks so much for having us. Happy holidays.
Hi, Dr. G.
Yes, so we have two folks from a company local here. We're going to learn all about it in a sec, but it's called Nurse Next Door. And Andrew's the general manager, and Jennifer is a community liaison. We met recently at the Peace of Mind networking group, and I heard all about their stories and how they parallel one another. And we thought it would be a great topic to talk about during the holidays. Because Jennifer, she is approaching the deathversary of her grandmother who lived with Alzheimer's, and she was her caregiver on New Year's Eve. That will be 1 year for her. And she took care of her for 8 years with the help of Nurse Next Door, and then ended up working for them. So that's an interesting story. And Andrew, you shared with me how you took care of your grandmother in Los Angeles and passed the baton on to another family member as you continue to develop the business. So we're just going to kind of dig into those. But first, let's talk about some of your holiday traditions. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Me and my wife have our young daughter. My wife is Jewish. I grew up very Catholic. Lighting a menorah was a very new thing for me. Learning the prayers, passing that tradition down to my daughter, so that she can pass it down to her daughter. I always tell my wife, plenty of Catholics, very few Jewish kids going out around the world. So we'd like to keep that alive. That's our family tradition.
Nice. Nice. How about you, Jennifer?
I don't have that many set family traditions. My family is all over the place in the United States. I think of course, we always stay in touch regardless of where we're at. And I think holiday movies like Christmas Story is the one thing that is required every year for all of us to watch. So that's probably the only one.
We watched it too, and we catch new things every time we watch it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful Christmas tree you have there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, we did something different in my home. I'm an empty nester. So, of course, we had the matching pajamas all in separate places. And then we actually wore our pajamas in the car over to my son's house so that our granddaughter could see we're all together. And we took our Christmas Eve dinner over there and kind of remixed it, the prime rib. So we're just enjoying the empty nest life. But let's jump into these stories. So, Andrew, maybe we can start with telling us about the company Nurse Next Door. What type of services are provided, and tell us the background about this company.
Nurse Next Door is an international franchise, Canada, United States, Australia, and the UK. Been around for about 22 years now as a franchise. Been here in beautiful San Diego for about 6 years. I've been with the company for about 5, coming up on 5. And our company emphasizes happier aging. The concept that you don't need to get old and stay depressed. You can really fight against that curve. We emphasize doing the things necessary to keep you in your home, keep you out of a facility setting where you have a less of a personalized attention. So that's where we specialize in.
Wow. And so let's just talk about your journey, Jennifer, of how you were taking care of your grandmother. And I want to first just thank you for letting us honor her as we're approaching, her deathversary. Her name was Sallee Proudian. And tell us about her. Tell us about her legacy, and then how you took care of her and how you found Nurse Next Door.
Yeah, well, I want to start off by saying thank you for having us on, and for doing me and my family and my grandmother the honor of having this podcast in her name. That means a lot. It really does. It really touched my family to hear about that. So thank you. I became my grandmother's primary caregiver in November of 2015. We had known for a couple of years that she had been having memory issues, but was firing everybody that we tried to hire her for her at that time. She was a low-level dementia at that time where she was passable and she could do that. So me being the closest family member to her, she was in Los Angeles, I was in San Diego. I left my job and would commute up there every week to keep an eye on her. We moved her to San Diego in early 2017. To be closer to me. At that time, we moved her in independent living. She thought it was just a vacation home, which she loved and stuff like that. But about a year and a half into that, she moved in with me when she had a fall and she became a liability for independent or assisted. She would have to go into memory care. So she moved in with me in downtown San Diego. Nurse Next Door comes into the picture because during the early months of the pandemic in late May of 2020, when we were in quarantine, it was just me and my grandma. My grandma had a muscle pull along her sciatic nerve, which left her kind of unable to move. She just needed to stay still. But with mid-stage dementia at that time, she didn't know she had this injury. And so she couldn't follow what she needed to do to heal. So after sending her to the hospital a couple of times, the hospital initially for figuring out what was wrong with her, my family found Nurse Next Door. And I think it was within 24 or 48 hours, Nurse Next Door had caregivers in my home to help me because I was completely at a loss. It's only me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to, kind of help my grandma. She's screaming in pain. I'm sending her to the hospital. So they came in and really provided me with the important resource of a caregiver by my side every day, helping me, training me, doing all of that stuff. I think we sent her to the ER about four times in like the period of 5 days. It was rapid succession because even with two caregivers looking after her all the time, she would still just scream in pain. And so we would send her back. At that time, we decided it was necessary for her to go into respite care where she could have 24/7 medical professionals keeping an eye on her so that she could recover. Again, at this time, I had no idea how to navigate that world at all, especially during pandemic. Where do I find care for my grandmother? So I turned to Andrew and Nurse Next Door saying, this needs to happen. They were obviously on board with it. I said, what do I do? Where do I go? I have no idea where to put her. This is terrifying because people are dying. I put her in a facility. No places are even letting me. So Andrew specifically really helped me navigate that world and recommended me a few places and facilitated the process to putting me into getting me into her into respite care. We also hired Nurse Next Door to come in every day for 8 hours to be my eyes and ears for my grandmother and have one-on-one attention with her. So because I couldn't go into at that time, I wasn't allowed into any facility. So they would give me detailed daily reports on everything. They would spend time with my grandma. They also recommended to me her physical therapist to help her during recovery, and they trained with that physical therapist. During that time as well, we switched her medical insurance, and Andrew recommended to me a mobile doctor because again, she was on Kaiser previously and then switching to another. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. So Nurse Next Door really provided me a lot of resources during a very scary time, a time where not only did, as a family member whose loved one was, everybody's thrown into Alzheimer's, nobody knows how to navigate it, but especially during the pandemic where I don't know what to do, there's even more limited resources. They really helped me navigate. My grandmother was eventually cleared to move back home, came back home, was going to have Nurse Next Door in with me for 8 hours a day to kind of give me some caregiver relief. And then she could stay with me overnight. However, we realized that her new baseline had really shifted and she needed constant care, including overnight, because she would get up, things would be upsetting. She just had a rapid cognitive decline, lost her mobility and everything. So Nurse Next Door then immediately came in and covered 16 hours for me. So overnight and the afternoon. So I could get a break as a caregiver, do things what I needed to do to take care of her and myself, and then sleep at night. So they were really integral for that that whole year. Then I think it was end of December of 2020, we started looking for placement. This is when the vaccine started coming out, for placement for her for a facility, a memory care facility, when it was time to, needing all that care. My home was basically turned into a nursing home, a lot with like all the medical equipment. Andrew also, I was like, I need this. And he's like, don't worry. Or like, how do I do this? And he trained me on a lot of things. But again, I turned to Andrew at that time saying, okay, we want to move her into memory care. What do you think would be good for her? Where do we go? We've been to an independent living that kind of sussed out what worked for my grandma and what didn't. He knew my grandma well, the caregivers knew my grandma well. And so he was able to provide recommendations to a facility that we ultimately moved her into. And it really was just a great place for her, really to match her needs, what she wanted, what was best for her, the kind of caregiving she needed. And then again, I hired, or my family hired Nurse Next Door to cover days when I couldn't be in, because I needed a break. I would work during the weekdays, and then I had Nurse Next in come to do the one-on-one caregiver that my grandma really thrived on the weekends. So that's my journey with Nurse Next Door,
Yeah.
and my family, which was it just meant so much, that how much they helped us really when we needed it so much, and how quick and responsive they were with.
So Jennifer, while you just described, a lot of the challenges that, I try to educate folks on the late stages of life. Everyone who follows the podcast in the audience, they know that I'm a hospice physician, but Mourning Dove was born to take care of people during those phases. You described being a caregiver from afar, in LA, and then moving her to the independent living, and then a fall. Usually that's the crisis that triggers the next thing and puts caregivers in, just the cycle. You mentioned 4 hospitalizations in 4 days. I mean, those are the things that, I see so much and I like to educate on. That's why we do this podcast, so folks can plan ahead, so they can navigate. And Andrew, sounds like he was a lifesaver. So Andrew, could you tell us, is the case management or how would you call that? Is that something that's a common service with Nurse Next Door? How you helped Jennifer navigate all of these things with her grandmother?
In the beginning, it wasn't a common service. Everything during the pandemic was a struggle. Everything we did was ad lib. I and the staff looked at every situation individually and thought, what do we need to bring to bear to make this thing work? We ended up with Jennifer's grandmother, we ended up creating different policies, different procedures. Just the whole company came from basically the fire. The disposition that I had, being a very green manager during a crisis, was we could take on everything. I now know that was a big mistake to make that, to bite off more than you can chew. In some of these instances, we were not prepared, but what we did is we got prepared during the process. COVID would take out a caregiver that was scheduled for Jennifer's house in that living room. Then who would have to fill in? I would come and fill in. Sometimes the referrals, vetting out your referrals to figure out who you actually can work with during this time It was an extraordinarily hard thing for us to do. I can't say that we did it perfect, but we tried our best. Since then, everything that we learned has been integrated in some way. Some things we left on the table, other things kept on growing. Concierge service is a word that is thrown around a lot, but there's no replacement for one-on-one personalized care. That's something that everyone can agree on. And that's what we strive to do with all these cases. You'll fall short, but I think that's the important thing, is that you're trying to create that personal connection. My favorite line from Jerry Maguire, creating personal connection. uh,
Yeah, that's fantastic, and again, you so beautifully laid it out. And I know you live this, Jennifer, having to switch insurance from Kaiser to Medicare to have a mobile doc, right? I often tell folks, if I do a 602, for instance, I'll give them some education on what you can plan for or look for. I'm actually calling it a healthcare roadmap, but how it's going to be, at what point should you consider, staying in place, aging in place, where you're not trying to get a ride to the doctor, where the doctor comes to you. And so all that stuff is so valuable. So tell us, a little bit about how then you decided to, once, your grandmother passed away, tell us how that went. If you did hospice at all, and then when did you actually start working for the company?
Yeah, no. So my grandmother will have passed away again. It will be her deathiversary on New Year's Eve, December 31st. I had, interestingly enough, getting to know Andrew, our stories are kind of parallel. Everybody kind of asked me for a long time, well, what are you going to do when you can no longer be a caregiver, right? Once your grandma passes, what are you going to do? I stepped out of the career world. I was in marketing prior to this, but then I had an 8-year gap on my resume, right? I had a job, but it was with my family as my little caregiver. But I related to Andrew because he was also a caregiver for his grandmother, who was living with Alzheimer's, and had a similar background to me. He'd done marketing in the past, and that kind of threw on the light bulb, right? I was like, oh, that's something I could do, right? Because it kind of combines my career and professional background with, my personal background, personal working background, and personal passion now, right? Over those 8 years, I really developed a passion for Alzheimer's, and especially navigating it, because again, as being, as a family member, like so many of all of us are, trying to navigate the world specifically of Alzheimer's and caregiving. How do you get this doctor, or do you get them diagnosed ahead of time, or where do you go? When's the right time to transfer for this? Or how do you get a mobile physician? I didn't even know what palliative care was, and I found out during 2020 that, hey, what is this research that can have? Oh, you can actually have palliative care. It's hospice or whatever. The hospice can be a scary word, but it's not. Or it was with we got my grandma on hospice care in 2020, and they were with her right up until the end. Amazing, though. They had music therapy, which was my favorite thing, because my grandma, that was the one thing she connected to for a long time. But anyway, having learned about Andrew's situation, I said, oh, that's something I could do. He really helped me. I would love to do something where I help others and take my experience as a caregiver navigating the world of care and pass it forward to others who feel lost or need some guidance. And so this past year, I told Andrew, I was like, hey, I'm looking for, another job, would you be my reference? Because he said he would. I'm like, my family, am I going to tell my dad, is he going to be my reference? And he said, actually, you have this opportunity. Would you mind coming in and seeing if it's a good fit for you? So that's how I became the community liaison. I am now providing the service, or in the role of what Nurse Next Door did for me, right? So connecting, giving resources within the community of care to each other, helping support each other in this community to serve those who need care and their loved ones who need care. So it's kind of a perfect kind of meld of my background and my passions, and I'm really thrilled to be in this position.
Yeah, you're the perfect person to share. Andrew, when, people in the audience, they may be somewhere in the journey like you were with your grandmother or Jennifer, maybe they're pre-crisis before the fall, before the hospitalizations, or maybe they're knee deep in it. When is it time to call Nurse Next Door?
Oh, well, the time to call Nurse Next Door, the time to care is well ahead of the actual fall. Everybody is going to have their fall. That's a reality of life. We're going to not be okay. We're going to have a bump or a lump or a broken something. But I tell people, I tell my clients, I tell my friends, I tell my family, why not know the people beforehand? Why do we need to do this now? Why are these interventions happening so suddenly? Why not warm up to the experience? It's really learning to say, I could use help. Help me. I could use help, Andrew. So when is Andrew going to give up the keys? Or when is Andrew going to say, I can't get on that ladder anymore? I turned 42 this year, and I'm not the same person I was at 41. A little slower. Things are happening. So at all stages of life, you can say, I'm open to help. Now, when it comes to our seniors, truth of the matter is there's a stubbornness there. They need to be able to admit sometimes or not admit. They're going to need to be open to receiving some sort of help. Whether it doesn't have to be from Nurse Next Door, it could be from the family themselves. And usually that's where it starts. When am I going to let my son carry something for me, or my daughter take that extra trip for me at night? Things like that. There's all occasions to call Nurse Next Door. You just had a baby and you need some support. You can call Nurse Next Door. But really, it's the idea of help. When am I going to be open to accepting help? You should be open all the time.
Yeah.
Life.
Yeah, that's a good point. And since I am a mobile physician, right, I have to talk to both sides. So two sides of this coin with the senior, right? Think about me. Think about you. I'm living on my own. Theoretically, if I get to be 90, I'm going to be doing my own thing for the next 40 years. So my children don't know what's going on with me. So the senior has to accept the limitations of their autonomy. That's the way I frame that stubbornness that you labeled. Because again, they've lived longer independently than they have with help. And so that's a shift that I try to get them to prepare for. We did a podcast end of season 2 with a memory care Silverado just to talk about mild cognitive impairment. 20% of folks diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment are going to develop into Alzheimer's disease. So if you know that, then your estate planning, your advance directive, your power of attorney, all that should be in place so that it's smooth at the end, right? That's the education. So then let's come to the caregivers, the adult children or the grandchildren. Many times they're just trying to get through the day. They have a career they're juggling. They may have their own family they're juggling, and they're just trying to do the best thing for their loved one and get through the day. How do they know when to say I need help? Some people culturally don't like other people in their homes. Some people don't have the means for this. I know there's a lot of new programs going around to supplement, but this is private pay. So how can people plan ahead? that's what I like to do. How do you plan ahead to know that we're going to need help at this point? Let's do it. Either one of you, please jump in.
I would love to jump on that one. Um, like you're saying, you're starting with conversations early about accepting help. No man is an island. Someone said that. But yeah, having those conversations early and often about the hypothetical, hey, what happens after my dad dies? That's a conversation I can have with my mother if I'm close with her. If I'm not so close with her, what happens one day after, say you get an injury, that kind of thing. Having those psychological conversations, more cerebral conversations, preps the act for change, because we're just prepping ourselves for the day. The next thing I think is, and you did mention this private pay thing, and I couldn't agree more with you about access. Access is a problem in our society. There's a lot of people don't use home care services. It's based on access. They don't have the cash for it. They have to go through a government program, maybe some veterans benefits, but getting to that is difficult. Well, I personally find this very distasteful. And in my position, we challenged one of our industry standards. Our industry standards is called a minimum, and those minimums act in some way as a barrier to help. Now, I don't rail against minimums. I think they're important. They're an important part of stabilizing the workforce of caregivers. But I do think that access should be everybody's right. Your money should not be too. Your money should have the ability to get you some help, and within reason. I think here at Nurse Next Door, at least while I'm in charge, we are willing to work with people outside of the minimum so that they can get some help, even if it's just that hump day shower. I think that's really important. You're a doctor, you know how important it is for people to take that shower every other day, and if you go a couple of days, life is a lot harder. So I want my clients to feel comfortable asking me, hey, it's the holidays, we can't really afford it, but can we do this? Can we do that? Can we go 3 hours? Can we go 2 hours instead of the industry standard 4 hour minimum? This is access. And if you have access, you're going to, later on, you're going to be more apt to ask for help, more open to receiving help. That's my point. That's my Alamo.
Yeah, and we're in the field, so we're used to this, but audience, what we're saying is there's going to come a point. Hopefully we don't have the falls, but statistically, like Andrew said, that's a big thing. Seniors, falls is the number one cause of morbidity and mortality in seniors. So what happens before then? Weakness. We lose our strength as we get older. How do we maintain that? Should we be getting physical therapy, before, that stuff starts happening? So we've had podcasts to cover all these topics. What kind of memory care do we choose? Like you had to do, we covered all that stuff. So I think we just kind of touched on all those topics and reiterated the conversations that need to happen in the families so that we can have, a good, well, the optimal situation for our loved ones, as they are growing older and as we, lead them to the end of their lives, because we're all going to go there at some point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered everything here. Did you guys have any closing words about Nurse Next Door, Jennifer?
Yeah, well, I'm so thankful for where I am now, where my family is now, approaching my grandma's, the 1 year after her death. Couldn't have imagined this is where I would be, but very, very thankful for it, because it's just really, really something that makes my heart happy.
Are you all going to do anything? Does your culture do any, some people go to the graveside, some people may do a dinner, or I don't know. Do you all have anything planned?
We waited a little while for her memorial. We did two. She's from LA. We had one up there, and then we did one in Hawaii this past November, where she had bought property that my dad later developed into a coffee farm that is now a legacy farm. And my late grandfather, my grandmother's husband, was also buried. His ashes were buried there as well. So we did a ceremony this past November. But I imagine moving forward, we'll all go there. It's a beautiful little memorial on the farm that belongs to our family. And this year, I'm just going to remember her in celebration. It was hard last year, those kind of final hours of 2023. When she passed, I remember watching the sunset come out as I was, after she passed, and just thinking like, oh, there she is, And so this year, I just want it to be just a celebration of her life. The first year is hard. It takes a while to kind of really go through that mourning process, even though dementia is a weird mourning process because it's long. It's still any death. It's still all of those first, seeing pictures, hearing sounds, smelling smells, certain holidays, certain memories that will just get triggered. But yeah, this year I'm finally in a place now where I can think of her, and all that joy that I felt with her my entire life is kind of coming back instead of the tears. Sometimes they're tears, but they're happy tears. So
that's so special. The joy that you had with her while she was here. Are there any, before we move to Andrew, are there any recipes or things that are special for her? I know I made my grandmother's pecan pie. Last night, my husband, he ran upstairs. He's like, I have an emergency. Someone broke in and ate all the pie. But, we get to enjoy that because it's a beautiful recipe that she perfected. So it's like we fight over it. But are there any particular things that, the coffee we know about, anything else that's special to her or remind you of her?
So I cannot cook like my grandma did. She was a Midwestern girl that could do a good chili or a good pot of soup. I'm not going to even touch it. I have the recipes. It's not the same. I do have all over my house, though, little things that remind me of her. Jewelry I wear. Some of her Christmas decorations are out this year. Those things always come out and stay out. And then just different ways to, touch. We did Nurse Next Door. We did a hot cocoa stand at different facilities. We go in and say, hey, we want to come in and serve hot cocoa. I brought in as a decoration one of my grandma's teapots for the table. And I remember one of the stands that we did, I overheard one of the residents saying like, oh, that looks like the one I had. And I was like, that was my grandmother's. So it was just really touching moments like that I'll incorporate into my life of something of hers that whenever I hear something. But that was a really special memory because it was just bringing that nostalgia and then sharing that it was my grandma's. It was like she was coming with us. So little things like that. Yeah.
Thank you. And Andrew, you have any closing words for us? Anything you want to share?
I'm happy I knew Sallee Proudian.
Yeah.
She was a great lady. We had a lot of fun. She fought us.
Yes.
She fought us. But she was a great lady. And it allowed us to develop this relationship with Jennifer. A couple of years ago, I said to Jennifer, we should go have a beer. We should talk about how we can work together.
Yeah.
We never had that beer, but we did work together.
Yeah.
And, it's come full circle. Jennifer was a great boss.
Yeah. I cracked the whip a lot on
She did.
Yeah.
She cracked the whip, but that's fine. I'm used to taking orders.
No, he was great. I ran a tight ship. I ran a very tight ship, and he was awesome. Yeah, definitely awesome. And I'm so glad to be working with you and have you as my friend as well, Andrew.
As most caregivers do, they run a tight ship.
Yeah.
As they should.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing, the story about your grandmother and the story of this amazing company that is a resource, valuable resource for people to get that help that they may need for themselves or as a caregiver and plan ahead. So feel free to reach out to us on social media. We'll have maybe a survey with this podcast, but we are here to provide education and empowerment so everyone can navigate the late stages of life and through the end of life. And for all of you caregivers out there that are working hard every day, we hope that this gives you some inspiration and support for what you're dealing with, and we're all here for you. So thank you for being here. I want to wish everyone a happy new year. And 2025, it's a big year, and I'm just grateful for this platform to help people.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you
everyone.
so much for having this platform. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Peace, everyone.